Morning, everyone who is just joining us, or good evening, depending where you are. We will just give it a moment or two for people to enter and get settled, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's get started. It's 8:01 our time, probably vastly different times wherever you're located. So a very warm welcome, whichever area of the world you're joining us from. We're very fortunate today to be joined by three talks with a number of speakers joining us from Hong Kong, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. So we've got a really great international, multinational group joining us today to share their practice and innovations in assessment. So I'm just going to kick off with a quick bit of housekeeping. So if we could kindly ask that you keep your webcams and microphones, webcams off and microphones muted, just in case we get any background noise while our speakers are presenting this morning. The event is being recorded, and recordings of today's session will be circulated to you after the event. And if you have any questions for the speakers during their talks, if you want to pop those in the chat or make a note of them, we'll be doing a Q&A session after our three presentations have concluded this morning or this evening. I'm going to have to keep saying morning or evening. And finally, if you have any technical issues during the session and you need any assistance, we have Ali Stafford from the Advanced Jhee team on the call with us. Please send her a private message and she will endeavour to get you sorted. So to introduce our speakers today, so as mentioned, we have speakers joining us. They are from Taylor's University in Malaysia. We have Dr. Sook, Jhee, Yoon, and Associate Professor Dr. Lydia Foong. Apologies if I'm not completely correctly pronouncing your names. You'll obviously be able to introduce yourself very shortly. We also have Dr. Ronan Kelly joining us from Queensland University of Technology in Australia. And for our third talk today, we have Dr. Emily Salines from Queen Mary University London, and Dr. Thea Stevens and Robert Mantho from Glasgow School of Art. So a fantastic lineup of speakers, and I will be handing over to them very shortly. But before I hand over, I just wanted to briefly contextualize the Advanced Jhee framework for enhancing assessment, which is where the title of this webinar has come from. And this is one of a series of 9 frameworks, plus an overarching framework, which has been developed with and for the sector over the past 2 years, aimed at promoting and supporting student success. And each of the frameworks are structured in the same way, providing 3 perspectives. So we have the institutional level, the educators, and the student perspective. And at the institutional level, the Enhancing Assessment Framework promotes a whole institution approach of shared responsibility in the development of policies and processes which support students in providing space and resource for innovative and future-facing assessment to be developed, shared with staff, and embedded within the curricula. And at the level of educators, where we use the plus symbol to include all staff who have a role in supporting student outcomes, the framework promotes a holistic approach by course teams across the 4 areas of focus. And the literature review highlighted that educators need time and support within institutional systems and processes to share best practice and apply them within the context of their own curricula. And this allows for a diverse, innovative assessment method to be developed, enhancing validity, authenticity, and inclusivity of assessments. And finally, the student-centered element of the framework aims to enhance learning potential through improved assessment design. And this includes peer and self-assessment, formative and summative assessments, all of which foster academic literacy and good academic practice. And these interconnected factors not only enhance students' understanding and trust in assessment, but also involve them in authentic tasks that improve both assessment and feedback practices and enable students to demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and competencies. So each of the talks today is aligned to one or more areas of the Enhancing Assessment Framework, and they aim to showcase and demonstrate how these different elements may look in practice. So with that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce and hand over to Dr. Sook, Jhee and Dr. Lydia Foong from Taylor's University, Malaysia. And they are going to be speaking to us about a whole community approach to catalyse the adoption of generative AI in assessment, which is a project that they led and have been implementing in Taylor's University. And this aligns to both the holistic programmatic approach to assessment and in the staff development quadrant, making staff development available in a range of places and within our framework. So I'm just going to stop sharing and allow, there we go, and hand over to Sook. Jhee.
Yeah, thank you, Vic. All right, I hope you're able to see my screen right now. And I'm going to put it on full screen. Right, good morning and good evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining this webinar from. My name is Sook Yoon, and my colleague Lydia Foong is also with us today. And because we only have 10 minutes to share, so I'll be doing most of the talking. But feel free to interact with Lydia in the chat if you have anything you want to ask her opinion or ask her any questions. So today we'll be sharing on our whole community approach to catalyze the adoption of generative AI, particularly in the area of assessment. So these are some of the things that we'll be covering in our presentation today. We'll start off by introducing a little bit about who we are, Taylor's University, and also our Center for Future Learning, where Lydia and I both are based. We'll be bringing you through some of the key initiatives at Taylor's. We'll talk a little bit about the challenges and the lessons that we have learned so far, and also be sharing some recommendations, and finally we'll conclude our sessions. So to begin, this is our university, Taylor's University. We're located in Malaysia. So we're a comprehensive university with about 16 schools and more than 100 programs. And our university primary focus is on equipping students for future workplace. And Center for Future Learning, our main focus is to drive key initiatives such as integrating generative AI into teaching and assessment practices. So generative AI became widely accessible to the public when ChatGPT came out, and Taylor's University took the stance to embrace generative AI, and we believe that the whole community approach can help different layers of people in the university community to embrace generative AI more effectively. So we adopted this stance since the beginning of 2023, and we drew inspiration mainly from 4E, the Environment, Engineering, Education and Enforcement, and also from AI Ecological Education Policy Framework. Along the way, we also benchmark universities around the world to look at different practices and see how we could contextualize some of those practices and make it a unique experience for our students. So the scope of this presentation, as I mentioned just now, will be very much assessment-related initiatives. And for the sake of this presentation, we'll be framing this presentation using Chan's AI ecological education policy framework with 3 main dimensions, which are the governance dimensions, pedagogical dimensions, and operation dimensions. So let's look at the first one, the governance dimensions, which relates mostly to the senior management. So as I mentioned earlier, the very first thing that we did was to establish the institutional stance. So our center, the Center for Future Learning, we benchmark the practices around of other university at that particular time. And also we did several consultation rounds with the leaders of the university. And then from there, we established our stance. And then earlier this year, we also established a generative AI task force to oversee 3 main areas, which are the teaching and learning, assessment, and also academic integrity. So this Gen AI task force consists of school leaders, and we also have lecturers and also professionals as part of the members of this generative AI task force so that we can cover the different stakeholders that we're dealing with in the university. And also as part of this task force, we also review and clarify some of our assessment policies, as well as our academic integrity policies to reflect a more clearer stance on Gen AI usage. Because we believe that clear guidelines can help to prevent confusion among the academics and also among students, and also along the way can support better ethical integration of generative AI. This policy review is an ongoing process. We get feedback from our students and lecturers from time to time, and this review, we are doing it from time to time as well to keep up with also some of the advances of AI as it's happening so fast. So this is the first dimension, and the second dimension is the pedagogical dimensions, which deals mostly with academics. So one of the first thing after we have set up the generative AI task force is to have discipline-specific benchmarking, because one of the feedback that we have received from the academic is that a lot of information that they able to access in the internet are very general information, but they felt that it would be useful to have more specific to their discipline sort of information to help them to understand and see how generative AI can be integrated, not just in their teaching and learning, but also in their assessment practices, making assessment more authentic and all that. They want more practical information how to carry it out. So we thought that this benchmarking was a very, very important exercise that we conducted together with the academics to build that shared ownership of this knowledge. And based on the knowledge that we have gathered, the lecturers redesigned some of their assessment. And in this current semester, they are piloting their assessment, which they have integrated with AI. So this is the second dimension. And the third dimension is the operational dimensions, which deal mostly with teaching and learning and also IT stuff. So we have a series of in-house training to support our lectures, and we have like clinic sessions. We are in the process of having recordings, self-paced materials for lecturers to learn at their own pace as well. One of the challenges actually, which we'll talk a little bit later, but maybe I could mention it right now, is that lecturers usually find it very difficult to squeeze a little bit of their time to attend training because the schedules are always very packed with classes, other compliance exercises, and for them to attend in-house training, the time is so valuable. So we have face-to-face clinics, as many as possible, but we are in the period where we are transitioning most of this information to a self-learning mode so that they can learn in a much more flexible way. And we also have sharings from external experts that we could invite like Mike Perkins, who talked about the AI assessment scale. So we invited him over to talk to our staff as well. And we also have other experts from the UK and also University of Sydney to talk to our academics. And also we also spoke to the student leaders to ask what are their concerns right now with these new policies being reviewed and being practiced. Do they have any things that they want to let us know that we can, that we need to address right now or in future if they could if they could foresee any challenges. So our reflection from our journey so far, some of the key challenges is that we felt that there's a lack of generative AI literacy among the staff and also the students. And that lack of literacy leads to the resistance of change. Even though they already attended some of our training, they still feel that they are not ready yet to embrace the change. They need more time, which is fine. So we just need to keep on supporting them and let them have that space to feel comfortable to embrace it and make the change when they are ready. And lecturers also very concerned with if students do their assessment in an ethical and responsible way. So this is a very common questions that we usually get from our academics. Some of the key lessons that we have learned so far, we think that it's very important to strengthen lecturers' understanding on the fundamentals of assessment and academic integrities. Because we feel that along the way, we always go back to what a good assessment design, fairness, validity, in terms of items, design, in terms of rubric design. So the fundamentals is really important for the lecturers to understand and practice it as they embrace generative AI. And this goes to academic integrity as well. We also think that it's important to allow lecturers to have that middle space to transition, allowing them to ask questions, expressing their concerns. Some of them have not quite grasped the concept of generative AI. So they will ask a lot of questions, and we think that this sort of conversation is very important for them to be heard so that they know that their concerns are being considered along the way. And also we think that it's very important to have stakeholders' involvement from the very start to create this shared commitment, especially when we are reviewing important policies like assessment policies and academic integrity policies, because the lecturers are the one that will be carrying out most of the work, and they need to know how does this affect their practices immediately. And open and transparent communication is also very important. We will take complaints, we will from stakeholders, from our own staff, from parents as well, and we will discuss these questions, concerns raised, and see how we can deal with the situation better. And we feel that this kind of process really build the trust among the community. So rather than just blaming, we try to find gap of knowledge, who need what sort of knowledge. And that's very important, I believe, for us. And the recommendations, we have a few recommendations for those who are also journeying this integration of generative AI into assessment. The first one is supporting lecturer initiative, evidence-based practices. Lecturers, they are very creative. They know their class, they know the demographic of the students, they know the AI literacy of their students. They are the one that can decide better when it comes to how AI can be integrated into assessment. So many times, actually, we will listen to the lecturers and get ideas from them and use their examples when we share with others so that they feel that ownership as well. We think that also is important for us to monitor and evaluate the initiative taken. As I mentioned earlier, we are right now piloting the AI integrated assessment, and we are also in the process of getting some feedbacks from the lecturers on how things have been so far. Continuous capacity and capability building. So not just for the lecturers, but also for professional staff like myself and my colleagues in the Center for Future Learning, because we are the one that will be taking questions, answering questions, and also providing information, what are the latest development in this area, so that capability building is very important. Cross-departmental effort as well, especially in enriching the AI literacy for students and staff. It's really important, and we actually have videos that we have recorded to tell students not just the benefit of AI, but also the risks and concerns when they use AI. And this sort of literacy is important for students, because we shouldn't assume that students would know what are the risks of generative AI when they use it, especially for assessment completion. And finally, we also co-design trainings with academics, because we conduct general sort of AI training workshops, but at the schools and faculty levels, they will conduct much more specific, discipline-specific sort of workshop. So like working with them can actually enrich the content that we do in the workshops. And yes, that's about it. Our sharing from Taylor's University. And if you have any questions, we're happy to take it. And yeah, so collaboration across all levels, we believe has helped us to adopt this whole community approach successfully. And our future focus will be on adaptability, so that we continually get feedback from the stakeholders to improve the current practices. So these are some of the photos that we have conducted. These are face-to-face trainings that we conducted during the semester break. And also we recorded some of those training sessions for lecturers to view them for those who are not able to join the training sessions. And yes, feel free to connect with us over LinkedIn as well if you have any questions that you would like to ask us. Yep. Yes. Thank you, Vic. And I'll pass over the time to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed that and really interesting to see. We will have some time for questions at the end once our three speakers have done or concluded their presentations. So any questions you have, if you want to pop them in the chat, we will make sure we've got time to pick those up. But we'll hand straight over now to Dr. Ronan Kelly, who is a lecturer in the School of Teacher Education and Leadership at Queensland University of Technology in Australia, who is speaking to us on a project around effective and equitable assessment preparation across diverse study modes. And this aligns to the scaffolding complexity of assessment tasks and diverse range of inclusive assessment instruments. Brilliant. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic.
Okay, all good?
All good. Okay, so good evening or good morning, everyone. I'm Ronan Kelly. I'm a lecturer in the School of Education at Queensland University of Technology. And you might be thinking that it's a very strange Australian accent, and that's because I'm actually from Northern Ireland, but I've been here in Australia for the last few years. So before I start, I want to give an acknowledgement of country, which is a common practice in Australia. And that's to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the lands of the Turrbal and Yugara people, who are the First Nations owners of these lands, and that learning and teaching has a long history of many thousands of years on these lands. So what I wanted to talk about today was effective and equitable assessment preparation across diverse study modes. And what I mean by that is really a problem that I faced in one of my units or modules recently, and that I've since worked with colleagues on as well to develop our practice together. And really it's about when I have this group of students, 200 students within the unit or module across the semester, half of them were face-to-face students attending tutorials in person. And then there was the other half who were online students, with a small amount of them attending online tutorials and a larger group studying asynchronously. So those were three diverse study modes and diverse groups of students studying different ways that I had to support across a single unit. And my problem was, how am I going to make sure that all of these students across these different modes are equitably prepared and effectively prepared for the same assessment tasks? And how could I use digital technologies to do that? So it maps to these areas of the professional standards framework, so assessment and feedback, digital technologies, and equity of opportunity. And as Vic has just said, it mapped it to the complexity of the assessment tasks, how I could scaffold them, and how I could support using a diverse range of instruments. So the unit itself was on teaching EALD learners. So that's teaching students with English as an additional language or dialect in schools. And this was for a group of 200 pre-service teachers. The task that they had to do was to take an authentic teaching resource from their subject area, analyze the language demands, analyze cultural assumptions and biases, and then plan to scaffold for that in their classroom. So this is also post-COVID, a challenge that we're facing across many institutions where we're a lot more flexible in how we deliver online and face-to-face learning. But how do we then give the coherent and sustainable experience for both students and academics? So what I did to start, and these are a range of small strategies that I used that when brought together, hopefully added up to having a bigger impact. The first thing was to legitimize diverse study modes within the unit. And the reason for that is the idea might be that this is a face-to-face unit, and if you're asynchronous online, you will just have to adapt and you're on the periphery of the learning. Whereas this diagram that I shared with students in week one legitimizes that being an asynchronous learner who's studying, not attending live tutorials or lectures, is equally planned for and given equitable opportunities for learning throughout the unit. So throughout each of these stages, you can see the students can connect in real time with their own time. They still complete the same pre-activities. Then they choose between face-to-face, online, or tutorials or the recording of the tutorial, and then they have the same post-tutorial end of week learning activities. And this gave all students a shared but flexible journey through the unit. Again, I represented this in the way that the modules were structured for each week on the Canvas learning management system. I mapped it out very clearly, the pre-tutorial, the tutorial, but also the recording, and what would happen for post-tutorial learning as well. So having that consistent modular structure, which could be followed by students regardless of their study mode. The other thing I did was created videos with assessment exemplar walkthroughs. So guiding the students through the task and how using examples from how previous students had completed this. So rather than this just happening within a tutorial or being hidden within a tutorial recording, it was a separate video, a short, concise video that all students could access at any time. I also created an assessment question and answer Padlet. And you can see there was a lot of questions on this Padlet. And one of the reasons was that students had to choose their own resource. They had to find an authentic teaching resource in their area. So very often they wanted a little bit of reassurance that they picked an appropriate resource for the assignment and to know that they were on the right track. The reason for this Padlet as well was that all students, again, regardless of their study mode, could access and check it, whether they were in the face-to-face tutorials, whether they were online. It became a single source of truth in many ways for all of the students. And if they had a question, they could go and see if it had been answered there before. And that way, the online asynchronous students could see all of the questions that were being asked by other students within the group. Whereas if this was just a spoken interaction in a face-to-face tutorial, then the online asynchronous students wouldn't have access to this discussion and this sharing of knowledge with their peers. So this is a sample of some of the things that I did within the unit. And thinking about, well, what worked, first of all, it was in the student evaluation surveys, a large number of students specifically stated that as an asynchronous learner, the structure, the design, and the resources supported them to feel included and to learn. So there was positive feedback directly from the students in the surveys. The video that I showed on the previous slide, it was the height on assessment, was the highest ranked video in all of the Canvas learning analytics, higher than any tutorial, higher than any lecture. So that again shows that high assessment drives learning. And when the online asynchronous students are engaging with those videos, it's the assessment videos that they'll go to first. The Padlet had a huge amount of engagement and responses, and it was very active. And while this is obviously a limited analysis and there's nuance to it, I did a comparative analysis of final grades at the end of the unit, because my initial concern was that the online students, especially the asynchronous online students, wouldn't be as well prepared and therefore might not be as successful in the assignments. So it was actually the opposite of that, where the online group of students had marginally higher average and median grades than the face-to-face group. So there were 103 online students and there were 95 face-to-face students. Although there is some limitations and nuance to that, where the online group, only some of them might have attended an online tutorial, or the face-to-face group, not all of them attended every tutorial. There were challenges, of course, and one of them I just mentioned. When the online group, we have the online tutorial, and then we have students who will study asynchronously. Although a lot of those students in the online tutorial may have registered for it with the intention of being asynchronous from the beginning. So in that way, it can be difficult to separate those cohorts and know how each of them are progressing through the unit that way. The assessment Padlets were very, very active and lots of student questions and discussion, which of course assessment drives learning. I also tried to use Padlets as part of the weekly activities for discussions, and those were not so successful. So that's something to revisit in the future. But the overall thing for me was it challenged my assumption that online students, especially asynchronous students, won't be as well prepared for assessment. And the idea was to give all of the students the shared journey throughout the unit. So in conclusion, what I found was that using digital technologies to support students across those diverse study modes, it does not mean that we have to create parallel pathways throughout the unit, as in saying that asynchronous students, this is your pathway, and then saying to face-to-face students, this is your different pathway. Instead, there is a way to ensure that those students have a shared pathway throughout the unit, but that it is flexible and it is sustainable to support those students across all of those study modes. So going forward, there's of course more I can do and work with colleagues on this. And this is something I've been discussing with colleagues in the university about other strategies we can use with that principle of students having a shared journey, but a flexible journey within that throughout a module of study. So that brings me to the end. And there's one thing I wanted to share, because I noticed on the new framework that there's the group work was part of that. And I wanted to share a recent study on group work assessment that I had with some colleagues. And we recently published this just a couple of weeks ago. And the idea here is that group work goes beyond assessment too. It also facilitates peer interaction, which then can facilitate and support a sense of belonging. So our research, we had surveys from almost 800 students, first-year students, from culturally and linguistically diverse migrant and refugee backgrounds. So those are domestic students from migrant and refugee backgrounds. And in this analysis, they very clearly said that, you can see in the title, more group work would be nice. So group work's not just an assessment tool, but also a tool that can support students to develop a sense of belonging through interaction with their peers. So on that note, I'll wrap up and happy to answer any questions at the end.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ronan, and thank you for joining us from Australia in your evening, also with the same with Sook, Jhee and Lydia there. Much appreciated that you're joining us to share your fantastic work. So I will, just now introduce our final speakers for today, this morning's webinar. There is a webinar at 12 if anyone really fancies doing a double today, and I'll introduce the elements and the areas we're covering there shortly. But just for now, if I can hand over to Dr. Emily Salines and Dr. Thea Stevens from Queen Mary University in London and from Glasgow School of Art. And they are focusing on developing an approach to compassionate feedback, which links to a wider project that they have both worked on, which was a QAA collaborative project. And this links to, within the Advanced HE framework, the ongoing dialogic feedback and feed-forward processes, timely and actionable feedback, and developing students' ability to recognise and act on feedback. So thank you very much. I'll hand over.
Right. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Share. Yes, can you all see the screen?
Yep.
Good.
All good.
Wonderful. So thank you, Vic, for the introduction, and it's really lovely to be here. With we really enjoyed the two other presentations. So as Vic was saying, I'm Emily Salines from London, Queen Mary University of London, joined by Thea from Glasgow School of Art. But we also acknowledge the authorship of our the co-authorship of our colleagues. Robert Manther, who may or may not be here actually right now, and Mariana Greted and Vicky Hill. So as Vic was saying, and for context, the work on compassionate feedback that we are presenting today stemmed from a QAA collaborative enhancement project that was led by Vicky Hill, and which brought together the University of the Arts London, where I was at the time as academic enhancement lead, Glasgow School of Art, and Leeds Arts University. And the purpose of that project was to identify areas of enhancement in assessment policies and practices to promote a student's sense of belonging and tackle issues of social justice. So that also fits quite nicely with the overall framework on student success. So the second aim was to link this relational work with attainment gap, awarding differentials, agendas in the creative arts, and then to develop dialogic, collaborative, polyvocal resources for staff development across the HE sector, because we were all coming from staff development area. Now, there were 3 strands in the project. One was on pass-fail, one was on compassionate policy, and the third one was ours on compassionate feedback. So again, for context, but quite important just to frame this work, these were the 2 big definitions which framed the whole project. The question of belonging as a sensation of connectedness, the experience of matching and feeling cared about, accepted, respected, valued by, and important, and asking ourselves, how can assessment foster this? And the question of compassion, which is a very active feeling and act actually about really emphasizing a radical act, really, of noticing distress and disadvantage, trying to really undo the harm that, or prevent the harm that assessment can do to students and staff. So over to you, Thea, to talk about the aims of the project.
And hi, everyone. So our aims in the project were addressing what we perceived as a gap. For while the central role of feedback in students' learning is well documented, and guidance and support for staff on effective feedback is available across the sector, we felt that using compassion as the main driver of feedback has been less explored. So we wanted to address this by, first of all, focusing on feedback as a critical area of practice and really considering the emotional impact of feedback, defining what compassionate feedback might look like and devising guidance and support for approaches to compassionate feedback, particularly when looking at the context of our own institutions. And at the time that the project started, we were all working in art and design, but also how this can translate over into other contexts too. And also to see how structures and processes around feedback can be adapted and modified, in particular taking into account issues of workload for staff and students to restore, to coin John MacArthur, joy in assessment, and how that has clear and useful implications within assessment design and ergo the advanced Jhee framework too. Next slide, please, Emily. So it was back in the spring of 2022 that we did our first collaborative staff workshop at GSA, and it was a really interesting time to be looking at this at GSA because we were starting a really transformational process of curriculum development. And in that workshop, we invited participants to think about their understanding of compassion in assessment and feedback practices. What would that look like? And perhaps even more importantly, what would that feel like? So the responses were really rich. It was very much the start of the journey, but they coalesced around the idea of education as an act of love. And to foster belonging, we need to recognize whole self, including awareness of diverse experiences. The qualities of compassion that came through were about mirroring, active listening, and honesty and transparency, including pulling back the curtain on assessment processes. And understanding and acknowledging our power, our pedagogy should suggest and guide rather than dictate, because after all, assessment does create artificial structures. And speaking of the durational learner journey, the participants really centered the importance of acknowledging past learning for our student learners as well. Moreover, and this is a very interesting question which we continue to explore, would compassionate approaches towards staff and student workloads place most value on formative feedback and assessment, and frame the summative, albeit with a feed-forward element, as more contained and manageable? One of the core themes was how feedback is a two-way conversation and a process, and recognizing environment, tone, and language. It's relational and dialogical, done with rather than done to, and how engaging students in conversations around assessment would help mutual understanding, assessment literacy, decoding, and being transparent as to how it works and why.
So over at UAL, after we've done that workshop with these rich findings and discussions that really helps us define what compassionate feedback might be like, we also produced then from UAL a podcast involving a range of colleagues and students to, again, asking them how they would define compassionate feedback. So the colleagues were experts from different disciplines: applied linguistics, assessment, belonging, nonviolent communication. And we put this together with the thoughts and reflections of Glasgow School of Art and produced prompts for compassionate feedback. which we then can use in our discussions with colleagues and indeed students to think about their view of assessment, how they perceive it, and how it could be enacted in a much more compassionate manner. What was really interesting is we felt was the foregrounding of assessment design as one of the key starting points for compassionate feedback. Thea has talked about the importance of the learner journey, as a key element for the students to understand where they're going, but also for staff to understand what students' journey is and where they're aiming for. So looking at assessment in a more programmatic dimension rather than individual modules or indeed individual tasks was really key. You can see here the other themes with the relational aspects, the student agency, equity, and of course tone and language, which are probably the most expected elements when it comes to thinking about feedback. So looking back again at this question of design, the sort of questions which really align, as we feel quite well with the framework, the advanced HG framework, was around questions such as: is feedback happening at times when it can be useful to students? Does formative feedback play a prominent role in the student journey? And can formative feedback acknowledge past learning and support students in achieving their learning goals? And again, around as Thea was mentioning, how does engagement with students, students' engagement in assessment, how is that supported, for example, through co-creation? And things which really link to what Ronan was saying as well, this question of decoding assessment structure of approaches and working with students rather than doing assessment to them. So this is where we were, and we've been using these prompts in our work, and using and getting quite a lot of really helpful conversations with colleagues and students. Since then, the work, we moved. So I moved to Queen Mary, where the work has continued, and the focus there has been quite a lot around, again, this program view of assessment and ensuring that the student journey is clear. So that really is where, if you like, by moving to a different institution and adapting it to a very different context, so not art and design anymore, where this work has helped me as an educational developer work with colleagues and inform this work. And Thea can tell us what you've been doing at Glasgow.
Thanks, Emily. And yeah, it's absolutely fed into the work that we've been doing at GSA across the various schools. As I mentioned before, we've been undertaking a really ambitious and large-scale transformation of our curriculum. So this really feeds into how we've been sharing, reflecting on practices, how we're shaping things as we go along and reflect and evaluate, not least in relation to approaches to formative and summative assessment along the learner journey, and very much with the idea of assessment literacy at the core of that.
Here is our details about the whole project, which we encourage you to explore, and some references. I would say also that and I'll stop sharing, that the project has continued in a slightly different guise. So there's another QAA follow-up project led by Vicky Hale, Neil Currant, and Liz Bunting, and it's a compassionate assessment network where colleagues are more than welcome to join. Once I finish speaking, because I can't do both at once, I will put that in the link in the chat for you to look at and link to afterwards. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you both for joining us today and sharing your fantastic work around compassionate assessment and feedback. So important to start from that point rather than think about it as an afterthought. So thank you so much for that. There's so much for us to think about. So there are a couple of questions just appeared in the chat. So we've got a few moments just to, so we will be sharing slides, and we'll make those available with our speakers' permission. Yes, I think Yvonne, the link will go in the chat. Emily is going to do that. So there's a question there from Jianmin Chang. Is it to anyone in particular, maybe to Sook, Jhee or Dr. Lydia? In terms of AI use, do you penalise students writing assessment if similarity is higher than 25 or 30%? So I don't know if anyone wants to, any of our speakers want to come in on their thoughts potentially around the use of AI detection tools and their possible problematic nature. I'm already answering the question for you. I'm apologising. Jhee, over to you.
Yeah, I'll just share how we approach this from our university. But yeah, if anyone would like to share how your university will be dealing with this issue, will be great. So for us, we kind of like take the educative approach rather than the penalty approach. So we educate the academic staff on how to read the AI writing indicator. So it's very different from the similarity percentage. So that's very, very important for academics to know. And also some of the major software that we are using to get the AI writing indicator, they also have disclaimer on how to read the percentage. So this is kind of information is actually very important for us to share it with the academics. They must first know the difference between the AI writing indicator and the similarity percentage. So that's number one. And number two is that if they feel that there is a need to have a conversation for the students, they can always have that conversation with the students to check, like, not to say check, but like to discuss with the students how they come to know or come to make the decision of their argument, maybe revisit some of the arguments that the students have made in their answers when they submit the assessment. But of course, the most useful one I would suggest is to start looking into assessing process rather than just looking at the products at the end. Because when we look at process, that's when we can actually see the entire how the students form their thoughts and their arguments throughout the process and throughout the semester. I think that will be more useful than penalizing the students. Setting percentage might not be very helpful. That's my take on it.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a further question just come in around the how you motivate people within your university to actively engage in training workshops. I think that's probably a challenge faced by many, that you put on lots of training opportunities, but how do you ensure that the people who really need it actually do attend?
Yeah, we do. We first identify which group of academics would need the training the most. So we started it off with the senior management of the university, followed by the leaders of the faculties and different schools, followed by the program leader or program directors. So someone who designed the programs. These are the people who need the macro view of AI, not just one particular course or subject. They will need the umbrella view. So these are some of the groups of people that we think that we should first target. So once we have managed to keep them abreast with what's happening in the space of AI and assessment, then the information gets disseminated to other layers of lecturers as well. So it's easier to build that understanding or that agency to the urgency to know what's happening. From there, we get the conversations going, and that's how we motivate people to come to the workshop. And during the workshop, we usually target lecturers who have lower proficiency level with technology. So we do a little bit of hands-on, give them that confidence that they too can do it. And I think these two strategies are helpful. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a question here for Emily around acknowledging past learning with students, and a request that you just expand a little on that.
With pleasure. By the way, our colleague Robert Manzo is here as well. Sorry, Robert, I couldn't see you earlier because I couldn't see your slightly different name on your screen. So welcome, Robert, here as well. So what we meant. So yes, the question around whether we mean by whether it's past learning on the same course or before the course is both. It's part of that, particularly within the context of the art and design disciplines. It was really enabling students to bring their whole self to assessment, and therefore acknowledging what their journey, their individual journey may be. So being aware of where they are at, I suppose, and moving forward with that. So looking at assessment via at program level enables to view that journey within the program, but we would advocate expanding that thinking and looking at where are they coming from and what are they bringing to assessment. So I hope that answers the question.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our speakers today for sharing your fantastic work. It is really appreciated. And just to round up our session for this morning, just a couple of moments just to highlight to you a few ways in which, if you are interested in looking further into assessment and feedback practices, and how we can best support students to have the best experience and outcomes that they can. Just to highlight that we obviously as Advance Jhee offer curriculum reviews, consultancy, staff development, and we have resources such as the assessment and feedback superchargers as a means for you, similar to the compassionate assessment resource, to start prompting discussion and reflection about what good practice looks like, how you can evidence that, and how you can share that across your institution or program teams. Within the Knowledge Hub, we have a range of resources that are available to you, highlighting, again, excellent practice. So we've got the practitioner guide that accompanies the framework that was co-authored by a number of academics in the UK and Sweden, focusing on exploring opportunities for co-creation, engaging students with feedback, ensuring that they understand the assessment itself and what good looks like. So there are some really good practical tips in both that and the case studies compendium. And we also have one of the speakers in this afternoon session on multimodal learning and how multimodality can offer options to students and build in optionality in assessment. So this afternoon session, if anyone really fancies doing a double, we're joined by speakers from the University of Glasgow, from Ireland, and the University of Liverpool. And upcoming, we have a podcast on assessment and feedback, and we will be joined by Professor Naomi Winston, Dr. Miriam Firth, and Dr. Lauren Woodlands. So we will be focusing on all things assessment and feedback, the challenges, the ways forward, the trends, the innovations that we're seeing, and that will be recorded in January and available in early February. So we'll make sure that's made available and publicised to you. We also have an assessment design e-learning module. There is a link there, again, will be shared after today's session if anyone is interested in having a look at that. And we do welcome all of you here today to share any of your effective practice. We're always looking for people across the sector to share the work that they're doing and build, effective, great networks. As we're sort of seeing today, there's such interest in the work other people are doing and how you can enhance your own practice. So please do submit a paper and drop me an email if it's particularly around learning and teaching or assessment practice of any area. We're really interested in looking for opportunities which we can support and develop your work, we can publicize your work, or we can build networks. So any of those, please do take part, all welcome. And finally, just to introduce the next webinar in this series, which will be using the framework for flexible learning, and that will take place on the 22nd of January. Again, with 2 opportunities, the morning slot if you are based in the UK, or lunchtime, whichever works best for you. So a huge thanks to everyone who has joined us today. Really appreciate you giving up your time to join us, and particularly to our fantastic speakers joining us from all regions of the world. So thank you so much, everybody. We're bang on 9 o'clock UK time, so we will end there and I'll stop sharing. Many thanks.
Thank you, Vic.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank
Stay in
you.
touch.
Have a good day.